Alright, so I have been updating the jump gate mod a little bit. First of all, you might have noticed compared to the previous video that there's a lot more frame blocks being used. That's the interior walls currently used as a placeholder. That is because the mechanics have changed a little bit. The mass, or the maximum mass that can be transported with a gate is now defined by the amount of frame blocks. Every frame block adds a specified amount of mass that can be transported with that gate. So in this case I have roughly 770 blocks in this gate. Yeah, 768, which comes to a total of 3 metric tons that can be transported with this specific gate structure, with the chambered size of 72 by 72 meters and by 160 roundabout meters length. And yeah, the more mass you want to transport with a gate, the more frame blocks you will need, but still not as many that it would limit you in the way how you design that and come up with a nice looking gate. This is more a non-optimized version. It doesn't really reflect the most optimum version that you can build. But yeah, the other thing is that power consumption is basically a two-part thing. We have the idle power consumption, so that means when the gate is built and calibrated, which means that it knows its size, it knows the blocks that belong to it, it monitors the blocks for changes, damages, and so on. And when the gate is connected to another gate that has at least the same chamber size, actually it has to have the same chamber size. Gates cannot have different sizes because it needs to make sure it needs to be ensured that when you enter the gate at the very edge, that you can still arrive at the edge of that other gate, and if one of them would be bigger and you would travel back to the smaller one, it would cause issues. So if all of that is correctly defined, they are linked, then the idle power draw will happen. So the idle power draw is basically defined by the size of the chamber and the distance. The distance has a fixed minimum length that is boiling down to a specific amount of power draw. So it was either 500 kilometers or 1000 kilometers. I can't remember right now, but it's still opened up for balancing on my end. I still need to fine-tune the values. But you have a specific minimum power that will be drawn, and then the further away the gate is, the higher the power draw will become, which can be up to 3 times of the regular power draw of gates within 1000 or 500 kilometer distance. So in this example, the gates that I have connected here, the red block, are 2219 kilometers away from each other, so that will lead to a distance modifier of 124%. As mentioned, the further away you are, the higher that consumption will get, up to 300 times that. So in the worst case, you get roughly 3000 megawatts of power draw, which is, again, something I'm fine-tuning, but it's intentional because that structure should be less achievable than using jump drives. It has more benefits. It allows you to jump with any ship, regardless of size, especially if you have a very small ship. You can use those big gates without any issues, as long as you have access to them. And the construction of the parts will also be quite costly to make sure this is like an optimization, not end game, but late mid-game kind of item. So the other factor beside the idle power draw is the travel power draw. So whenever a ship travels, or an item travels through the gate, because not only ships, small or large, but also floating objects can travel through those gates and be transported. Depending on the mass of those and the distance, another peak power draw is applied, which lasts for currently half a second, which I will probably fine-tune a little bit further to make it even higher. But if you have a lot of those in a short amount of time, power draw will basically increase more and more, because you will consume more of those peaks or have more of those peaks, and not enough time to handle them or wait for them to get done before the next one happens. So to handle a gate like this, not only are there a lot of solar cells included, but also a big battery bank plus the row of batteries here, and a large reactor to, well, in creative mode, give enough power to operate that gate. Again, I need to test that in survival and balance the values. And something else you might have noticed are the blocks on the sides here. These are the fireworks blocks. Because in this version of the mod, which is another little update, we can trigger a timer block whenever something arrives through the gate. So when a ship arrives, we can execute the timer, or it automatically gets executed, to trigger an action or a set of actions and do something with it. You could enable a storage system, you could enable a beacon, or just in my case, show a bunch of fireworks. And to showcase that a bit further, and also the case that I mentioned before with non-ship setups, like here, something I had last time already, you can, of course, use that to transport ores or things that you produce at one end of the galaxy and travel them through a gate to arrive at your collection endpoint. Of course, as always, or as with the last update, gates can only be connected one-to-one. There is no mass linking of multiple gates to a single target, at least not at the moment in my current planet design. So with this contraption, I can, for example, extract and shoot out ice cubes, or ice ores, and they get transported over with the gate. You see the fireworks going up to showcase, hey, there's something arriving, and they are collected again with that collector at the end and put into the same system just for showcasing that. The effects are still quite heavy. I'm working on that. But one change compared to the last update is that the orientation and placement of those effects are now more correct than before. Disable that again because it is quite heavy visually. Essentially, the animation is now started in front of the ship when it starts entering, and placed at the back of the ship when it arrives in the arrival gate. You might not always see the arrival animation when going through a gate that is in an unloaded area of the world. So the gate is getting loaded, you arrive more or less at the same time, so the timer block never gets triggered because you already arrived at that point. It doesn't really make much of a difference here, but if that's really a problem, I can try to fine-tune that further. And I've also updated the example with the PEM autominer script. So I still need to build an example using the vanilla AI blocks, but you can see here a ship is traveling from one docking port through a series of smaller gates, arrives at that gate, lingers for a moment, which is intentional with the recording that I did. It's always better to head straight into the next gate, but when you arrive in one gate, linger a little bit because it makes it easier for the drone later on to follow that path in both directions. And then it docks. And in roughly 3 seconds we'll resume the whole operation. And as mentioned, the number of frames defines how much mass can be transported, but it's still... And here you can see the gate lights up because it shows the arrival of the ship. So the frames are really important for defining how much mass can be transported with a gate, but they are still not so many in terms of required blocks that it should put any blocker on creativity in the way how gates are designed. there should still be enough creative freedom to come up with nice structures. This one is anything but optimized for its job. It's just a example that I'm using and modifying further and further. You can probably use a much smaller gate for that amount of frame blocks, and yeah, could add more frames to transport much more mass with the same kind of size that we have here. For example, at the moment it wouldn't be able to transport my biggest exploration ship because it has a mass of 13 tons and no, 13 met. Wait, is it tons or is it 1,000 tons? I'm actually not quite sure. Oh yeah, so it's 3 million kilograms, so that's quite heavy. But yeah, anyway, the ship wouldn't be able to be transported, but it still works for my large grid miner here. So if the ship is too massive, has too much mass to be transported, or the power is not sufficient of the gate, or any other reason, you will get a notification when trying to travel through it. Same as when you don't have permission to travel through a gate, because gates can be set to either be linkable only by yourself, because it's set to the owner, so only you see your gates and you can connect your gates together. Or you can set them to faction, which of course means that players of your faction can link to the gates that you have built and vice versa. And then there's the public setting that allows you to set gates to connect to any other public gate. So the configuration UI is pretty simple. Let's reset that to show you all the properties. Build info support gives you a lot of details, but this is still to be updated, and I will put some of those information, the most critical bits of information, I will put into the regular panel so that people without the build info mod will still see it. You have a name for the gate, which is not using the grid name or the block name, because I thought it's much more useful to have a dedicated name field for that. You have the accessibility properties. So as mentioned, you can set this gate to be only accessible and usable and linkable by the owner or by the faction or by everyone on the server. The standing with the faction doesn't play a role right now, so you could, if you have a public pirate gate, go through that without an issue. Might be, in my opinion, more usable for interesting role-playing scenarios. Then you have the timer, the arrival timer block. There's always per default the no action entry selected, and then it will list all the timer blocks available. If your timer block that you just built doesn't show up in the list, you just need to reopen the UI or try to select something, go back and in again, because there's a bit of glitching with the UI of Space Engineers here. And then the search filter basically does what I mentioned. It filters for the selected types of gates, my own gates, faction gates, or public gates. And then you select one and can connect to it. If you have just built a gate and or have modified the gate frame blocks or the controller, or you have damaged any of the blocks, you need to calibrate the chamber again, which will basically calculate the size or the volume and some other properties, do some setups inside, and then will become visible for other gates to be picked and connected to. When you connect to a gate, you are left with the gate name, which still needs to be locked because you are already connected, so it doesn't make sense to change it now. And you can still change the timer block, of course, without having to change anything on the connection, and you can disconnect it then and nothing else. Yeah. And that's basically the current state of the mod. I still need to test everything out in survival mode and on our server to make sure everything is working fine, because it is supposed to work well with the dedicated servers. And yeah, stay tuned for any updates. Subscribe to the channel to get notified if something changes. And yeah, hope you like it, and see you in space.